Thanks a lot. Then let me start the presentation. So this presentation is about 30 or so minutes, where we will be discussing about what is DevSecOps and how there are a lot of confusion about what DevSecOps really is. And then most people take it for granted that, hey, this is what is DevSecOps. But in reality, it's completely different from what kind of myths we are seeing in our day-to-day life in IT security. So I'm Imran, as Rami introduced me. Thank you, Rami, once again. I'm also known as secfigo if you want to connect with me on social media or LinkedIn and other ways. So I run this company called Practical DevSecOps and also Hysn Technologies, Inc. We are basically a DevSecOps consulting and training organization, and I've spoken in a bunch of other conferences on DevSecOps. I've trained in conferences like Blackhat, AppSec EU, Nullcon, and a bunch of other conferences. So I wrote a book around it, but then I think I know a little bit about DevSecOps to talk about DevSecOps. So let's talk about why DevSecOps is very important. So if you saw this, if you see this, ESG, which is an organization, they recently did a survey in which they found that only 8% of the respondents are securing their CI/CD pipelines, or the DevOps infrastructure, which means there's not a lot of people who are working towards securing DevOps infrastructure. But there's a lot of entities who are moving towards DevOps or DevSecOps. But then none of them are really talking about or thinking about how do we secure these pipelines to ensure that people don't have mass vulnerabilities, right? And you see within 2 years, 68% of the people would be securing their at least 75% of their CI/CD pipelines. So there's a huge demand in the market, and a lot of people are looking forward to secure their pipelines. Now, you might be wondering how and what a CI/CD pipeline will look like, or how's the DevOps pipeline will look like. So this is a typical example of a DevSecOps pipeline, wherein apart from what your developers are doing, we would be embedding a security task. As you can see, we can embed static analysis, dynamic analysis, scanners like Nmap, Nikto, IIST, or Docker hardening, Docker security, compliance as code. So many organizations are doing it, but then some of them are doing it in a wrong way, or they are doing it, but they are thinking, oh, this is all it takes to implement DevSecOps, which is not the case. Now, before we dive into what are the realities and the myths of DevSecOps, let's bring all of us on the same page on what a definition of DevSecOps is. Now, all of us might have known about this picture. This is a picture of traditional SDLC, wherein we will start off with requirements, we will do a design, implement, and deploy, and finally we maintain it. And this cycle of going from requirement phase to maintenance phase would take anywhere between a month to 3 years, and each of them might take about 6 months as well. So something like requirements might take a month, whereas some projects might take 6 months. But the problem with traditional SDLC, or the waterfall model, also known as waterfall model, is that the time to fix a vulnerability increases drastically as you move towards your right-hand side. As you can see, if you are building a product and you're trying to secure a product, then it would be much cheaper than fixing it at the end, which is after you do vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. And that's why more and more organizations are trying to fix these issues early on with the help of DevOps. And as you may know, DevOps is all about breaking silos and letting developer and operations teams work together as a one team rather than working in their own silos as different departments. And if you do this, there are a lot of benefits which an organization will get. Specifically, they will be able to create products rapidly and deploy products to production rapidly, thereby giving features and benefits to their customers at a very fast pace. And then similarly, if a system goes down, they would be able to come back to a stable state pretty rapidly. These are some of the stages you might also see in a DevOps phase. As you can see, this is exactly the same kind of scenario you had in the traditional SDLC, just that there is no beginning and an end. Here it's an iterative continuous process. As you can see, it's a cycle. Now, knowing that, there's a couple of challenges there. For example, when we do pen test, it's usually at the end of a development cycle before it goes to production. And we might get anywhere between 5 days to a month to do pen test, right? And by the time you do pen test, it's already too late because they have to go to production maybe next day, and they would like to have you do a pen test because of compliance and regulatory requirements. But then even if you do find issues, what ends up happening is that they don't have time to fix it. Even if they do have time to fix it, they don't have time to do performance testing, QA testing, and a bunch of other important testing which needs to be there before they go live. And then if you think about this is a Microsoft SDLC, secure SDLC process. And we have about 16 to 17 processes here. And if we do each of these, they will take at least 16 minutes. But in DevSecOps or in DevOps, it's a great problem, or it's a great sin to take about 16 minutes to do any kind of test. Either it's functional testing, or is it just deployment testing and whatnot. So it's important that you finish any testing within 10 minutes. And if you have performed static analysis and dynamic analysis, you know that they usually don't finish within 10 minutes. So it's a huge problem there as well, right? And another problem which DevSecOps solves is that it will help you do security at scale. As you can see, if for every 100 developers, you only have about one security engineer. And no matter what kind of a genius you are as a security engineer, it's very, very difficult to fight with 100 developers. Try to fix the code created by 100 developers. It's very, very tough to do that. So this also helps us in DevSecOps, helps us to solve this problem as well. Now, with that said, we know that it will help you reduce your risk. DevSecOps will help you reduce risk. It will help you go to market faster. It will help you reduce your vulnerability and your exposure, and it will also help you reduce your attack surface. Now, when we talk about DevSecOps, people are really interested to implement DevSecOps. As you can see, it provided lots and lots of benefits to you. And also, it's because it's the new sexy thing around these days. So obviously, everyone wants to do DevSecOps, and many organizations are rightfully so are moving towards DevSecOps. Now, there's a huge myth in the security industry that, hey, DevSecOps is a new breed and it's completely different from DevOps. That's not true. DevOps is also DevSecOps. It's just that we are looking from a security aspect of DevOps. That's what makes it DevSecOps. So DevSecOps is a way to bring attention to security in a DevOps environment, right? And more so, if we look into the definition of it, it's basically a set of practices to reduce time between committing a change and that change going to production. For example, Facebook, Amazon, and Google, they deploy to production, especially Facebook, they deploy to production every 9 seconds. Your developers are pushing code to production every 9 seconds. Do you think we can do pen testing every 9 seconds? It would be very, very tough to do. Even if we do, it would be very hard to scale security's efficiency while doing it. And we are just talking about one such methodology. But other problems which it brings along with DevOps or DevSecOps is that instead of your developers are pushing code to production every 9 seconds, which means they might also be pushing vulnerabilities to production every 9 seconds. So imagine that. You are now giving a way for your developers to push code to production very rapidly, also vulnerabilities. But then the positive side of it is that you no longer have to wait 6 months to fix a bug. Instead, you can also fix a bug every 9 seconds. So it gives you tremendous power to do DevOps or DevSecOps. And if you do this properly, then you would be able to sleep peacefully as a security engineer, right? There's a survey recently which said that 65% of the security people are in depression, and an average age of a CISO is just 17 months. why do you think that's the case? Because security is in a tremendous amount of stress because we are not able to scale security. Now, if you do DevSecOps, we will be able to go to market faster while being secure. We will be able to provide flexibility to both development teams and operations teams. And it will also give a lot of reliability. For example, a typical example I give of a company called Etsy. So a guy was doing a bug bounty hunter was doing a pen test on one of their apps, and he was hunting for bugs. And even before he reported, Etsy fixed it because they were doing DevSecOps or DevOps properly, right? So that's a huge myth in the industry that DevOps is something different than DevSecOps. It's not. In reality, it's one and the same, but you have to talk specifically about security aspects. Another myth we have, which we see a lot, is that they think, oh, I just have to buy a bunch of fancy, expensive tool and put it into a DevOps environment, and that will make it all DevSecOps. Again, it's a myth. That's not reality, right? A big chunk of DevOps is all about people. So if I have to summarize DevSecOps in 3 sentences, it's people, processes, and technology. And you notice that the people come first, and then processes, and then technology. So we have to specifically concentrate more on people if you are trying to implement DevSecOps. Remove their blockers, make them more efficient, make them go faster at the speed of DevOps so that you are not being a blocker. And ideally, so people think that, hey, I will buy some US-based vendor and I'll implement into my DevOps, and then magically I will become DevSecOps. And more so, I have seen these people are thinking about, oh, the more expensive the tool, the more nicer it is. But sadly, that's not a reality. Like I would say 60 to 80% of the tooling in the market is not yet ready for DevSecOps, especially I'm talking about security vendors. Right? That's another myth we have. And then people also think that, hey, DevSecOps or DevOps is all about automation. Not so. It's automation is just 1/4 of the puzzle. Specifically, if you look at it, if I have to call someone a DevSecOps shop or an organization as DevSecOps organization, they have to do these 4 things. They have to work on culture, they have to work on automation, and they have to work on measurement and sharing. As you can see, the culture comes first. So you have to build that culture where you are letting the entire organization work with each other in a nice synchronous way. Now, the reason why Google, Facebook, Amazon, and all of these, Netflix, if I have to add, all of these organizations are able to innovate at a very fast pace is because their culture lets them do it. But if you see your banks, typical banks, or other hierarchical organizations, they are not able to innovate at a faster pace because their organization structure is very hierarchical. If you have to do something, you have to get probably 10 to 15 approvals from someone before they can do something. Whereas DevOps lets you do everything with the help of automation and then measurement as well. If there's this saying that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. It's as simple as that. Right? If you want to be the best in the industry, you have to know what best stands for. That's where the measurement comes into play. And then this is another trend we see these days is that security brings up their own tooling, which doesn't integrate nicely with the whole DevOps organization. So ideally, we should be using the tools which developers are using. For example, if you're using GitHub, GitLab, version control systems, CI/CD pipelines, we should be using those tools to make them more efficient, right? With that, I will stress again on cultural aspects of it. So there's a law which says if your organization works in a very hierarchical way, the design of your software you produce would also be like that. But if you're in a very flat organization, the kind of design you will create, the application you will create would also be like that, pretty fast, innovative, and best of the breed. So we should be striving towards creating the culture which will help us do DevSecOps. Another myth we see these days is that if I do DevSecOps, I will lose all control. As a security team, I will lose all control. But again, as I say, this is a myth. In fact, this will give you more power as a security because you will be able to see what your developers are doing. You will be able to find vulnerabilities early on, way before they even go to production. They are developing something, you will come to know, oh, they just introduced 10 new vulnerabilities, right? Or an operations team just deployed a big application, it is not hardened. You can do that. And you can also go ahead and make sure you can continuously scan for compliance. You can make sure, if you look at the typical compliance initiatives, they are a compliance at one point in a time. They are not, if an organization is compliant now, there's no guarantee that they are compliant next minute or a day or two, right? But if you are able to embed compliance as part of DevOps, you will be able to ensure that your organization stays compliant year around, not just for 1 quarter or 2 quarters. So you don't have to worry about that, right? And in order to do that, again, we have to build bridges among different teams. We have to make them work with each other in a very seamless manner. And then if I have to put it in a way, we have to build guardrails. The guardrails are the ones which you see when you go on a highway, right? They are not trying to block you with a bunch of different toll gates, right? That's why many organizations, many sub-organization like a DevOps team or IT, they think the security is a department of no. They say, hey, these guys are very difficult to work with because for everything they say no, 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 right? And rightly so, we are known in the industry these days as department of no because we are blocking the work which DevOps team is doing, right? We will be able to still be able to embed security as part of DevOps when we make sure that we are not blocking the bills, right? And Agile will help us do that. DevOps will help us do that. If you want to do DevSecOps, Agile and DevOps has to be in place. If you don't have it, it's really, really difficult to implement DevSecOps. Now, people assume, oh, I can just go from zero to DevSecOps. Again, not going to happen if you don't have Agile. You need CI/CD pipelines. As you can see in this image, if we have to do DevSecOps, which is at the end of the cycle here, you need to have continuous integration, you need to have continuous delivery, or if you have continuous deployment, that's even awesome. But then bare minimum, you need to have a CI pipeline, continuous integration. If you have these, then you will be able to do DevSecOps. Now, we talked about what DevSecOps is not all about, right? Now let's talk about how or what a DevSecOps looks like and how you can start implementing DevSecOps in an organization. So the first thing you have to do when you want to implement DevSecOps is you have to think about how I can embed security early on, which is what most people call these days as shifting left, right? So we'll be using CI/CD pipelines to embed security, be it static analysis, dynamic analysis, IAST, RAS, whatever you have in the industry, you will be able to do that. If your developers are embedding secrets, are pushing secrets to your repositories, you will be able to find those secrets before they go to production or before something bad happens to your organization. So that's the first principle you have to follow to implement DevSecOps. The other one we have to do is we have to make security self-service. Because as I mentioned before, for every 100 developers, we have one security engineer. And no matter how good you are, you will not be able to scale it. And I was being just nice by saying 100:1 ratio, but it's usually for 500 developers, there's one security engineer. Imagine that 500 developers, you're competing as a security engineer, you're competing with 500 developers. You cannot, no matter what you do, scale that kind of a thing unless you do self-service, unless you automate it. So that's what we would be concentrating on, self-service. And then you have to use something called infrastructure as code. Right now you have all the technology and all the tooling available in the world where you can do security as code, compliance as code, hardening as code, and whatnot. So, and all of this is possible with a functionality called infrastructure as code. So you will be able to make sure your system stays hardened and never go down. And the biggest problem we see in the hardening or patching industry is that we have to wait at least 1 to 2 weeks before we patch because we are afraid this might break a functionality. But if you do DevOps, DevSecOps, or infrastructure as code properly, then you don't have to worry about that, patching your systems immediately. And then we have to rely more and more on secure infrastructure, secure by default frameworks and services. And this is possible now. For example, a quick win you can do is try to use your cloud infrastructure. And cloud infrastructure by design is more secure by default than your own data centers. Of course, you cannot do it if you are if you are in a very highly regulated industry, maybe a government organization or a banking industry. I do understand that. But then you can have on-prem cloud infrastructure, be it a VMware, OpenStack, Kubernetes, whatever you have. These frameworks will provide you secure by default functionality, so you don't have to worry or lack security at the end. And then finally, again, the scaling comes in. If you don't have a security champions program, which is basically you picking up one developer from each Scrum team, Agile team, and giving him some responsibility of security. He doesn't have to be a security expert, but he should be a person who should think about security from a team's perspective. And if there are any issues, he should liaison with the infrastructure team, security team to bring up their concerns. Maybe he will be involved in threat modeling, he will be involved in triaging false positives, or just making your product secure by default. And then a typical journey of implementing DevSecOps takes anywhere between 3 to 5 years. And it's not going to happen overnight. That's what I was stressing around. If you embed tools and think that's what the whole DevSecOps is all about, then you could not be more wrong than that. So it takes about 3 to 5 years, even with best of the breed tools. So in order to implement it, you have to go strategically. You have to first learn how to walk, which is just embed tools as it is without making huge changes to the tools, and then, but not failing the bills. If you do fail the bills, for example, you have static analysis, dynamic analysis tooling. For example, you have check marks. These are like paid tools, but you also have free tool here like Zap. If you embed these tools by default have a lot of false positives, right? And you are failing the bills based on a false positive is a sure recipe for disaster. And that's why then the development team will not be interested to talk to you, because you're failing the bill based on false positives. So you should be failing the bills only after you have removed the false positives, right? And then, as I mentioned before, we have to use the tools which developers are using. Instead of using something like Arch or GRC, you have to put the security issues in the Jira or Bugzilla or whatever bug tracking system you're using. Use that instead of that. And if you do this, your mean time to fix a vulnerability will reduce from 2 months, 3 months to just 15 minutes, because you are giving developers security information where they need it at right time, at right place, instead of asking them, hey, click on this, log in into this machine, do this, click with this button, and then you will be able to see issue. Again, a very, very bad user experience as well, right? So I'll skip this and go directly to conclusion, right? As I mentioned before, we have to ensure that we are shifting left, embedding security early on, make everything as self-service, so we can go at the speed of DevOps. And then finally, we have to do security as code, apart from compliance, which will help you do compliance as code, hardening as code, and whatnot. And again, we have to go slowly. We have to first learn how to walk, probably crawl, walk, run, and sprint, right? And again, it takes about 3 to 5 years for you to implement DevSecOps, right? I think I'll stop here and open up session for Q&A.
Imran, thank you very much. That was a very interesting talk. In fact, yes, we do have a question, but just before we start with the Q&A, to our attendees, just so they are aware, Imran, with the partnership with Hackers Academy, are also going to do something in JISAC. So keep chatting on Slack and keep updated through our Hackers Academy website for more details. But certainly for anything to do with the training that you have there, that's right, Imran, at JISAC?
Yes. It's practical DevSecOps, where you will, Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you could just introduce a bit about it and then just leave 1 minute for the Q&A, please.
Sure. So the practical DevSecOps is a training where we take you through the entire journey of implementing DevSecOps in an organization, no matter if you are a bank or if you are a consulting firm or you are just some government entity, right? We'll start off with what is DevOps, what it takes to implement that, like CI/CD and all of that. And you don't have to know anything about DevOps. All you have to know is about basic security, like OAuth top 10, something of that sort. Right? And we'll take you through this entire journey where you will implement this end to end, including security as code, compliance as code, hardening automatically, blue-green strategy, embedding static analysis, dynamic analysis as part of CI/CD pipelines and whatnot. So I think and all of this happens on cloud on browser-based labs. So you don't have to install anything. Everything happens in a browser window, and you will get to see how a security engineer, a normal, even if you're a network engineer, network security, application pen tester, vulnerability assessment person, you still be able to learn a lot from this course.
Great, great. Well, great. So let's go to the question. So it's actually just one question, and it's a bit different. So in terms of the question, Mr. Imran, it's a quite an interesting one. How can you change the developer's mindset about security? So you've laid basically the foundation of migrating the technical aspect of DevSecOps, but how about the developers themselves? I know you hinted a bit about it, but do you have any real life examples, please?
Yeah. So if you're trying to implement DevSecOps, it starts with awareness or education. That's what we call, right? So we have to first talk, hey, we are here to help you. As a security team, are here to help you and the entire organization be more secure so that we give best of the service to our customers. We bring more value to our customer or the community or yourself. So the first thing starts off with education. So what we have to do is maybe have a 1-hour session initially to introduce, hey, how security has changed from a traditional department of no, which is like, hey, we do everything, we control everything, we stop you going from production, to, hey, we are here to help you. What do you need from us? What can we give you so that you can do your job better while still being secure, right? A great way of starting this conversation is embedding static analysis, dynamic analysis tools in a CI/CD pipeline. Again, with a big caveat that you should not fail the bills. As I mentioned, false positives, right? There's a lot of false positives in the tool. So don't fail the bill, but then put this thing. Now, amazing thing which happens because of this, as I mentioned before, I was helping an organization where they had this constant problem that security teams give the development team a bug, and that bug stays, even if it's a severe bug like a SQL injection and whatnot, stays open for 6 months. And if a security team goes and they say, hey, this, it's been 6 months, you have to fix this, they usually go to their head of a department and take an exception, saying that, hey, we don't have time to do this, probably we'll do it next year, right? And then they might end up being in the news saying that, hey, blah, blah, blah company got hacked because they had struct vulnerability, right? Like Equifax. So starting this conversation of how we can help you be secure while not being a blocker to you, right? That's a good startup. And if you don't know about Security Champions Program, please do look out. Just search for how to create Security Champions Program, or just come talk to me. I'm available as secfigo across all social media accounts. I will be very happy to help you how you can start this program in an organization, take it through an iterative process where it will not be a blocker, but still providing a lot of tool. And then I would add to this is that people think that you have to buy expensive tool to do DevSecOps, as I mentioned in the myth. But there are a lot of good open source tooling, especially from OWASP, like OWASP, SAP, you have dependency checker and whatnot. You have a lot of these tools, amazing open source tools, which you can embed it. Of course, you need to babysit them a bit, but then you don't have to put in a lot of money to show value to your organization, especially your management stakeholders. And if you have any more questions, I think I will stop here. But if you have any more questions, I will be in the Slack channel for more questions. I will be there during the entire, the track. So feel free to contact me there. We can chat more about it.